This episode of the Brewers Council is brought to you by the patrons over at Patreon. For this tier, you can sign up for me to personalize a deck, give you personal reviews, and actually have it answered in a video form. So if you're interested in this, go check out patreon.com/roguedeckbuilder. Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com with this month's episode of the Brewers Council. In these episodes, I'll be going over all the inquiries from my patrons over at Patreon.com for the $15 tier for a specific deck critique. This week, this comes from James, and he wants me to do a deck based upon Jorah of the Ghitu. I'll just read his introduction here. It says, "Thanks in advance for your help with this deck. From a recent video, I know that Jorah is on your not-so-nice list for Commander. However, the occasional jerks infiltrate our Saturday multiplayer Commander group and my local game store with completely broken decks that combo out early or make the game unplayable by freezing you out of your mana or Iona, so no more spells of a certain color. In response, rather than risk legal consequences, I'm seeking a creative solution in-game. Seeing that smirk on the new art of Jorah from Mind vs. Might, as well as her crazy ability, sold me. So know these dark arts will be used for good." Alright, so Jorah deck. He's provided a list, and we'll show the list in a second, but he also has some concerns of what his list does and what he wants corrected. So number one, a major weakness of the deck in its current form is lack of flying creatures, and the reliance of cards like Thopter Spy Factory and Tauren Sky Summoner to meet the conditions to generate flyers. Another major situational weakness of the deck is Atraxa and Proliferate, so we'll look at that and see why that might be a problem. And a major weakness of the deck is also lack of specific card retrieval from the graveyard. Another situational weakness against decks that do damage, like Perforos, is there are only 3 cards that generate life: Locks into Warhammer, Vince's Journal, and Kraken's Eye. But we don't have to worry about any land destruction because their house rules says there is no land destruction. He goes over some of the strengths. One is the ability to draw and loot cards. There's 22 cards in the deck feature some sort of draw or looting. Another strength is acceleration. Yeah, it's usually Jorah. Jorah's very good at accelerating. Doesn't need a lot of help in that department because anything with 2 converted mana or the 2 colorless can then start suspending. And major strength is there's a lot of combos with like Djinn Illuminatus and Mystical Tutor plus Temporal Mastery, and cards like Sphinx of the Final Word that can start to basically make extra turns and replicate miracles and so forth. What he likes about his current deck is it's versatile and has a number of win conditions, one being commander damage by basically creating enough ways to pump up Jorah and swing in for lethal. Another way is to snatch all their creatures and kill them with their own creatures. It can mill, it can burn, and it's got a lot of these other combo-based feels to it. So his questions are, so how does this deck measure up? I'm curious about your insights about what you think about as you build a commander deck and fine-tune it. Although you've said you're not a fine-tuner, I believe you'll be great at it. Aw, thanks for that. Through the lens of this deck, what greater or better or more creative synergies are possible through substitutions? What makes this even more of a toolbox deck? What would you add or take away? Perhaps there's some some novel synergies you see with the deck, as is plus or minus a few cards. So here is James' deck pulled up, minus the basic lands and some of the other lands I didn't include in this list. So right off the first bat, the first column here is cards that are lands that just upgrade based upon basic lands. We have a Riptide Laboratory. For example, it returns a wizard, which can be powerful, getting Jorah back into your hand if it was targeted. There are a few other wizards in this deck that you can save with the Laboratory, so of course it's a decent little addition. Let me throw the display up here. So we also have the Rogue's Passage. Rogue's Passage is an okay inclusion. I'm not either for or against this card, as it can make the infinite combo, making Jorah up to lethal commander damage. I don't know if I like that strategy. I think it's going to be very few and far between for that to happen. I mean, it is an option. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of commander damage to begin with, so when I'm building a commander deck, I usually don't look for that angle. But I think you'd have to go all out, more of an all-out strategy with Rogue's Passage to make it worthwhile, over just another dual land. But again, I'm neither for nor against this inclusion. Reliquary Tower is usually a staple in most decks. In this deck, you're going to be unloading your hand, though, so again, it's not necessary in this particular deck. And Desolate Lighthouse is fine because you can draw a card and discard a card, nothing wrong with looting. Soul Ring and Izzet Signet are kind of considered in this list as well for the mana producers. Gilded Lotus is not included, which I think could be another card that could easily go in this particular strategy. Other of the lands, your usual suspects like the Temple is fine. And I'll talk about a few other here. So the mana base is fine. I think the rest of them were basically just like the dual lands and whatnot for fixing. So this first category here is going to be the removing suspend counters, which I think that the deck does a good job at. I don't know if there's missing any here with like the Clock Spinning, Time Bit, or Rift Elemental, the Time Bug. All of these are great about removing suspend triggers. So if you can get a suspend card on turn 4, on turn 5 you can easily get rid of all of them with particular cards here. A lot of them are proactive too, so you can put these out on turn 1 like the Rift Elemental or the Time Bug into Jorah. So that's fine. The next column he has here is going to be the ways of protecting Jorah, which is a decent little list here. I think that I'll talk about a replacement or an addition. The Massive Avacyn, the Swiftfoot Boots, and the Kabuto is fine as well, but I think there might be a little bit better. The Kabuto might be coming out too late. You want to be, once you got Jorah out, you want to be using all of your mana as quickly as possible by suspending cards. And the same thing with the Ring of Evos Isle. I think they're just better things. I understand you get 2 triggers with like the Paradox Engine. You can put 2 counters on Jorah. But to me, it's kind of one of the weaker cards as you have to pay the 2 to give it hexproof. I'd rather have it equipped, and then that basically you're good to go. You don't have to spend any more mana to give hexproof. But it's definitely a fine addition. I'm neither for nor against this card. The next column is the cards what I consider control cards. Thunderous Wrath being one that can do damage to the face. The Rinse and Repeat, yes, 5 damage. Buy it back if you have ways to copy it or get it back from your graveyard. Sure, I see that. I don't think it's necessary though. I think just a single target removal is quite weak in a Jorah deck, and you want to go bigger or everything in your deck needs to protect your combo. The Counterflux is fine. It's a perfect control card. Devastation Tide, returning all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, is fine, and especially if you can miracle it. The Vanishment, put target non-land permanent on top of its overlay for the miracle. Again, I can see Rinse and Repeat with Vanishments, but I think this is a weak card. This would be definitely one of the cards I'd cut out for something better. Aetherize is okay if creatures are attacking you. I'm neither for nor against this, but another card like Evacuation might be the right card. Washout is also a decent card, but the sorcery speed is kind of awkward with Washout. Plus, it doesn't affect everyone on the playing field as there will be multiple different opponents. Counterspell, of course, is fine. Cyclonic Rift is an auto-include in every blue deck. If you're running blue and Commander and not running Cyclonic Rift, you shouldn't be playing Commander because the card is just busted. And Rewind and Foil are also decent little control cards. The next column he has is the Draw. It has a diverse draw package with the Flow of Ideas. I think there's better ways to draw cards with Flow of Ideas. I'd actually rely more on your Payoff Cards for drawing cards. And just, you're getting a lot of advantage off of the suspending into the bigger cards that maybe a card like Flow of Ideas is just too slow to make it worthwhile. The Jhoira is fine if you're casting multiple cards per turn, which is what Suspend is allowing you to do. So I'm either for nor against this card, but I think there might be a few better ways to get a more consistent card draw. The Guild Mage is great for copying instant sorcery spells and drawing cards late game. This is a fine card in the deck. The Padim is okay, but you're rarely going to draw cards. I know it does protect your hexproof, the cards that are giving your card hexproof, so it's decent, but I think that this is an easy card to cut. The Keranos is fine. It is going to draw cards and become activated into a 6/5 Indestructible God. I'm okay with it. There might be better options to suspend because this mid-range type slot is the type of card that I like to avoid in Jorah. So you want things to come out quickly and then, or do very big things if you do suspend them. So you don't ever want to be like tapping out 4 or 5 mana for Keranos. So it's kind of an awkward card in the deck. The next 2 awkward cards in here are Trophy Mage and Trinket Mage. The only card that Trophy Mage can get is going to be the Loxodon Warhammer. So I think just one card in the deck is not going to be enough to include it. So a lot of people misread Trophy Mage. It is converted mana cost with exactly 3, not more, not less. And so, I mean, if you're running like something that was very key to the strategy, like Cloudstone Curio, I would definitely think about running this card. But as it stands, I think Trophy Mage is an easy cut as well. Same thing with Trinket Mage. Between just Soul Ring and the Skull Clamp, I don't think there's enough targets to make Trinket Mage really worth it. So I'd cut the Trinket Mage as well. The Tutor is great because you can set things up and it can go get like the Enter the Infinite. Of course, that can then be suspended later on. Definitely a decent card. The 3 cards I don't like in this deck are Reforge the Soul, Time Reversal, and Days Undoing. I know you can mill with like Reforge the Soul by recurring back the Reforge the Soul over and over and then milling out your opponents. Meanwhile, shuffling your stuff back in. I don't know if that's the best strategy for what Jorah wants to be doing. There's just other commanders that are better at doing that. I know you want diverse win conditions, but I think that is sort of the wrong way to look at Jorah. Jorah is an all-in strategy. The same could be said about this last column, the column I talked about earlier. When you're the combo deck, sometimes you just have to give on the control aspect. And so yes, you want some control cards, but you don't want to overwhelm your deck playing the control route. You want people to have to react to you, and all of your control cards really want to be setting up what you're going to be doing in the future. So the Days Undoing, the Time Reversal, and the Reforge the Soul, I think they're just better ways for you yourself to draw cards and then be good and not, help your opponents out while doing it. The next category is the kind of Skull Clamp category, as I want to call it, the tokens. So the Goblin Assault, which I'm going to show better things than Goblin Assault here. There are definitely better cards to put in this slot. The Metallurgic Summonings, which is decent as well because you're casting instant sorcery spells, and then you can get back instant sorcery spells, which is fine. The Tower In, once again, is a good way to keep adding creatures to then could be sacked to Skull Clamp or just chump block or just win the go wide strategy. And the Thopter Spy Network. I think the Thopter Spy Network is just too slow. You don't have other artifact creatures dealing damage. It's going to take another artifact, which you may have a hand that just doesn't have an artifact, and Thopter Spy Network is just a dead card. So I think there's a better target for Thopter Spy Network. I know you're worried about flying, but I think there is ways with the controller out with like Cyclonic Rift or like I said Evacuation or like the washout that's in here to just punish a go wide strategy that's trying to use creatures. So now we're on to the next column, which were payoffs. The payoffs are fine because that's what makes Jorah really good, is you can have a diverse package of payoffs. What I've noticed is that you're in on the Eldrazi in this deck. So if you're going to go into Eldrazi, you should go all in to Eldrazi and do the entire package. That's kind of how I built Animar. And so you want to play really the big hitters here, and I'll show those in a second. Of course, Omniscience and Enter the Infinite are basically the signature cards of Jorah, because this is the Omniscience and Enter the Infinite, Laboratory Maniac. Temporal Mastery and cards like Temporal Mastery are usually a 1 of or 2 of. I'm fine with Insurrection as well because it's an alternate way to win the game. And Teferi is good, but if you don't have a card like Gilded Lotus in here, Teferi does lose a lot of potential. So if you're going to go into like the untapping specific cards, like even Paradox Engine, Teferi, you want some huge payoff cards. The +1 is of course good with Teferi, but if you're planning on suspending Teferi, there are probably better things to do than suspend. Like I said, I like to skip the mid range with Jorah. Yes, it does make you a lot more focused on your commander and protecting your commander, but it has a lot higher payoff than suspending into like a 5 or a 6 drop. So the payoff cards are fine. It Betrays, Pathraiser, Ulamog, Kozilek, Artisan, Bane of Balagad. I don't know if there's some sort of budget in here that you're choosing these over some of the old school Eldrazi, but we'll look at those in a second. The Djinn is fine. It's a great way to start replicating your sorcery spells, which is great. After they've been suspended, you'll have mana to do so. The Sphinx of the Final Word, same thing. It basically makes all your things uncounterable. It can't be countered. Very decent card here. And Niv Mizzet, Draco Genius, either this one or the old school one are also perfectly acceptable cards. There will be a card that I like with Niv Mizzet if you're going to be running the Trinket Mage, which is Basilisk Collar. We'll talk about that in a second with the additions. That goes great with Niv Mizzet. It also goes great with other artifact cards that you can rinse and repeat. and just basically shoot things down. The Mindwreck Leech is okay. Like, I don't care about the other blue creatures get +1 other red creatures. A lot of times when you're going with Jorah into this strategy, you want to focus more on blue-red creatures. There's a lot of big, dumb blue-red creatures that do a lot of things. And so if that's what you're looking for, I don't think it's enough just to make like the Goblin Assault creatures a little bit better, or the Towering tokens a little bit better. So, but you may put a blue or red creature card from your hand on the battlefield. Can be strong if you have enough that are worthwhile. In this deck, you're kind of like half and half. Half Eldrazi, half Mindwreck Leech cards that are useful. So I don't know how I feel about that. I do like to go focus one or the other. And in this case, of course, Jorah has the most ability to be degenerate with Eldrazi. Arcanus is fine because it does allow some decent card draw, and same thing with the Tomorrow Azami's Familiar, allows you just to go through your deck very, very quickly. Whenever you would draw a card, you draw 3 and look at 3 and then put one of those in your hand instead. A lot of people actually use this card to lock it out because it actually doesn't draw cards. So you play like cards that people can only draw 1 card per turn, and this actually gets around it. So anyway. Then we have what I call kind of flex spots here with the glaring spotlight. It's fine. I never fault anyone for running this, but you being the deck that needs to be answered, I think this might be a wasted slot by giving your opponent's creatures, taking away their hexproof. I mean, I know you can give all your creatures hexproof. It's fine, but again, it might just be as you want to be reacted to. I have no feelings either way against this card. Sigil Starfish, there's just better things. I understand the scry, but there's better ways to scry. And Sigil Starshift will die from board wipes and a lot of other things. It's just a liability. It's definitely a wasted slot. Lane Line I don't think really works in this deck. A lot of your cards that you want to be running that want instant speed are going to be suspended. So, I can see some of your sorcery spells, but there are instant versions of the cards that you want to be casting as sorcery spells, so I think that this could easily be cut. Vincer's Journal, yes, it does gain you life, but Jorah is a commander that empties the hand quite quickly, and you always want an empty hand. So you're not going to be gaining a lot of life. There will be some better ways to gain life. Same thing with Loxodon and Warhammer. It's very awkward with a 3 and 3 equip, and if you're cutting Trophy Mage, it loses a lot of value. And Kraken's Eye, probably a little bit better ways to gain life as well. So that's the overview of the deck. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of what I would add to the deck. So in the land slot, if you're going into Eldrazi, the Sanctum of Ugin and the Eye of Ugin combo are insanely good. These cards, Sanctum of Ugin is going to allow you to basically chain the colorless creature. So whenever you cast a color spell from a mana cost 7, you go get another one and put into your hand. So when you're running Eldrazi, it's a no-brainer to run the Sanctum of Ugin. And same thing with the Eye of Ugin. Eye of Ugin is going to give you the reach late game or the range late game to just start tutoring up Eldrazi's, and that's why I think that maybe like a Basalt Monolith or a Gilded Lotus kind of want to be in this for extra mana to add and then even you could go into Paradox Engine and all that sort of degeneracy, and then Eye of Ugin gets really, really powerful by then tutoring up specific creatures cards that then can be suspended. Yes, 7 mana is quite that's actually 8 mana-ish. You got to think with Eye of Ugin, it does take your land slot, but it's worth it in the long run. So the first little category here, I guess this is just by converted mana cost. I should have separated here, but whoa. I think what we would run here is, if you're running Jorah, cards that complement Jorah as a commander, Training Grounds is a no-brainer. It will reduce her converted mana cost, or not her converted mana cost, her activated ability by 1, because it reduces it by 2, but it ends up being 1. And there's another one called Heartstone that could definitely go in here, but also reduces your opponent's stuff. And so in Commander, I really don't like playing cards like that, because I'm usually going to break someone else more than I'm going to break my own commander. So Training Grounds, reducing it to just 1, speeds up by double your Jorah, especially when you're playing this on turn 1, and then turn 4 you're going to try to suspend your entire hand. So then we have the card that I said with Niv Mizzet that works so good, which is Basilisk Collar, which gives Death Touch and Lifelink to a creature, so it's going to ping down and give you Lifelink. I think that's a little bit better than Loxodon Warhammer. And Basilisk Collar, you can still have the Trinket Mage, and the Trinket Mage will be able to tutor up the Basilisk Collar or like a Soul Ring or some of these other cards like an Expedition Map. So kind of these cards are good little Trinket Mage targets. So Elixir of Immortality will serve double duty. It will gain you some life, which you're saying that you're having a little bit problem with life gain, and it will also put cards that you need back into your deck with your other combos allow you to tutor them up and find those exact pieces. Some other cards that I thought about, there isn't a lot in blue-red that really set up your hand from your graveyard. There is like Codex Shredder is the only one I can really think of in artifact. But then like cards like Archaeomancer, they can get back specific spells. I think the best one for that is just Charmbreaker Devil, because this is the beginning of your upkeep. If you have the Paradox Haze, then you can do the beginning of the upkeep type ability twice with the Paradox Haze and get 2 triggers off the Charmbreaker Devil. So I think that that's the best way to really recur spells back from your graveyard. I don't know. You're just not in a color that gets anything but instant sorceries back very well from your graveyard. So protecting Jorah, I think Lightning Greaves wants to be here for twofold. Yes, it gives Shroud, not Hexproof, so you can't like target Jorah and then go the commander damage route. I think that's just something that you're not going to want to do with this deck. So the Lightning Greaves, I think, is a better replacement than the Ring, and then allows some of your other creatures with Annihilator, which is a very, very significant thing, to gain haste. And so once your Eldrazi get an Annihilator, they attack in, and your opponents are going to be sacrificing all their permanents. So it's a win-win there. So cards that go with Skull Clamp, I thought that if you're going to be running the Skull Clamp basically combo, Young Pyromancer and Docent of Perfection are better with Skull Clamp, because the Docent puts in 1/1 blue wizards that then become +2/+1 in flying once it finally flips. And it flips when you have 3 or more wizards, plus you're in a wizard deck, so it's going to flip quite quickly. Yeah, you're going to have some pretty big wizards in the deck. So I think that this one wants to go in with the Skull Clamp route. And even if the card that gives all your blue creatures +1/+1, because they will be blue, right? Yeah, this one will flip away, but they'll become, let's see, yep, just +2/+1, they'll still be blue human wizards, so they'll end up being a little bit bigger. And that's the perfect route to go with like the Skull Clamp. So protecting its flying is kind of a weird thing to worry about if you're going to be a Pillow Fort type deck, and you're in blue. So blue does have like Propaganda and access to Ensnaring Bridge and Crawl Space. Again, I don't know what your budget is if Ensnaring Bridge is just ruled out because of that, but a card like Jorah that is emptying the hand, Ensnaring Bridge becomes very, very powerful, and then Propaganda is just going to make your opponents think twice about attacking you. It's going to make like Krenko decks and Zuri decks a lot harder to attack in when they have to pay 2 per attacking creature. If you're running blue, this is just a rule of thumb as well. Just like Cyclonic Rift, it is a sin in blue not to run Rhystic Study. The card is just stupid good in Commander, and it's the best way to fill back up your hand with a card like Jorah, because you don't need to fill it back up in your turn. You fill it back up in your opponent's turn and then suspend everything. So Rhystic Study is great for that slot. Crawl Space is another card that works quite well. No more than 2 creatures can attack you each combat. That's another definite option. As far as the next category, which you're worried about life gain, the life gain cards are kind of awkward because you are in color combinations that do not usually gain any sort of life. In fact, all the other colors gain life. White, blue, and black gain life. Are white, black, and green gain life. Blue and red do not gain life. So it's just something you have to trade off by running a color combination that doesn't do that. But you have access to Aether Flux Reservoir whenever you cast a spell. If you've chained off a lot of cards in a Suspend turn, you're going to gain a lot of life off Aether Flux Reservoir. And it can also be an alternate win con. Wormcoil Engine is a decent little card. Death Touch Lifelink leaves back a Lifelinker and a Death Touch. That should be able to stabilize you, as well as Batterskull having the ability to then equip to bigger creatures and gain life. I like this card better than Loxodon on Warhammer. I mean, Loxodon Warhammer is fine. This is a nice little addition. Other control cards, since you are suspending cards like Duplicant and the Phyrexian Ingester work quite well because you can suspend them or hard cast them at that 6 or 7 area. They can exile cards when they enter the battlefield. Same thing with Duplicant. Duplicant imprints it and exiles a card, and basically gets rid of, copies your card with Duplicant, and nope, you get the power and toughness of the creature. So Duplicant is a creature card. Duplicant has power and toughness of the creature exiled. So same thing with Phyrexian Ingester is just a little bit better, but they're definitely great suspend targets. So this last category is really the payoff cards. We talked about Charmbreaker Devils as the way to recur sorceries late game. If we're running the Eldrazi strategy, you're going to run these two, the Conduit of Ruin, which then allows you to tutor up a Whenever you cast Conduit of Mage, search your library for a close creature card, put it on top, and the first creature spell you cast each turn is 2 less, so it allows you to hard cast those particular cards that you decide not to suspend. And as far as payoffs, if you want better payoffs, these are your go-to payoff cards in colorless and blue. The Tidespout Tyrant can be really, really good because it works with casting spells, and you can return your own creatures or your own cards back to your hand, or your opponent. So if you have some of those tricky hexproof cards, the Tidespout Tyrant can work around this by returning the card that's giving them hexproof. And every deck that cheats out cards, like Animar, this is one of my favorite cards to hit, because the card, if I have Tidespout Tyrant out in Animar, I'm going to win every time because it just allows me to chain off. In this deck, it's not as powerful, but it's still one of those 8-mana payoffs that is extremely good. The payoffs is easy with Jorah because anything that has a high converted mana cost is usually going to do something big. Ugin is one of those control cards that is very, very good. It's not a necessity by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a great payoff card with Jorah. Void Winnower, since we're in the Eldrazi strategy, these next cards I think are really, really good with Emrakul, Ulamog, the old school Ulamog, the old school Kozilek, and the Void Winnower. Yes, these two are pricey. Emrakul is not pricey though, and this one is not banned in Commander. And neither is Void Winnower. They're both not very expensive cards at all. So even if you're going to forego the cost of these two cards, I think you have enough Eldrazi in your original list to make it worthwhile. So those are some of the additions. I think in the comment section below we can help our friend out here with other, if you play Jorah. See, I play against Jorah a lot, and this is a lot of the strategies they like to run. There will always be some sort of degenerate. Enter the Infinite, a lot of them run just so many tutors to try to find Enter the Infinite and Omniscience. But if you're going to go tutorless or less tutors, then just having high payoff cards, the more high payoff cards, the better for Jorah. That's what makes Jorah so powerful, is who cares how many payoff cards. If you can get to 3 mana, these cards are inevitably going to start coming out. So that is, again, one of the reasons why I think that going Training Grounds is good, just to accelerate that, and just then protecting Jorah. You don't really need to protect Jorah after she's suspended some things. So those are my picks that I would add. I don't know what exactly I'd subtract to. I think I gave a pretty good overview of the cards earlier. But anyway, comments in the comment section below how you like this. If you are interested in joining the Brewers Council, go check out Patreon, and it's something that I guarantee once per month, if you're at that tier, that I'll answer your question, usually in video form, and give you some feedback. One of the things as a kind of community member is I get overloaded. And when I say overloaded, I mean really overloaded with emails or overwhelmed, I guess would be the best question. People find me on Twitter, people find me on Facebook, on Reddit, even on PucaTrade. I've got messages before that, hey, look at my deck list. People are just bombarding me with emails and messages, and I'm not saying don't do that. That's perfectly fine. I'm just saying a lot of times I don't have time to respond back, because then I go straight to work, and then at work I have people hounding me all day long at our game store, hey, look at my deck and help me out, and it just gets very, very overwhelming. Patreon, if you're part of that tier, I 100% will answer once per month a deck-related question and try to respond back in a video form or something just as snazzy as that. So appreciate everyone that's a Patreon. No pressure to join, but this is one way that gets you a direct link to me or direct contact to me to answer your question. Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.